Happy New Year. I'm Kimberly Didelowitz, President of Champion School of Real Estate, and it is my pleasure to sit in today for our owner and founder, Rita Santamaria, as she had a last-minute conflict to attend this morning. She sends her regards, and she sends a big thank you to all of our Champion students from across the state. I'm so excited to kick off 2022 with our champions who are signing in live from all over Texas to hear all of the good and great we can look forward to continuing to see in this hot Texas real estate market. It is a tradition every year to get the facts from Texas A&M Real Estate Research Center, PhDs, as they look into their crystal ball and share the real estate forecast for the coming year. But before I introduce our guest speaker, I would like to give a big thank you to the hundreds of champions, hello, zooming in live today from one of our 9 brick and mortar campuses in Texas and from our live studios. I would like to say hello and thank you to those who are zooming in live from their homes and offices. We thank you for being here today, and we thank you most importantly for 39 incredible years of business. Lastly, a warm hello and good morning to our amazing champions, employees, and teachers across the state. Without our amazing employees, we would not be in the business we've been in for 39 years, providing exceptional customer service to all of our champion students. Please be sure before we begin to have something to write with and take notes. And as a reminder, all of our champions interviews can be found on our champions YouTube channel. If you have not checked out our Champions YouTube channel, I encourage you to. You'll find an entire library of secrets to success in marketing, prior video interviews, a great resource of information. As well, you will receive a link to today's interview with Dr. Torres and a special link, video link from Rita Santamaria that will help kick off your 2022 goals. So won't you please join me in a virtual welcome as we introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Luis Torres, Research Economist from the Texas A&M Real Estate Research Center. Dr. Torres has received his bachelor's degree in economics from the Monterrey Institute of Technology in Mexico. He received a master's in economics from the University of Texas at El Paso, where his dissertation received honors. He later earned a scholarship to participate in the American Economics Association PhD Summer Minority Program. His PhD is from the University of Colorado at Boulder, where he specialized in international economics and econometrics. During his doctoral studies, he worked at the El Paso branch of the Dallas Federal Reserve. From 1995 to 2012, he was with the Bank of Mexico in the research department and the institutional liaison department. This is just incredible. You guys, I know, are going to hear incredible information today. He has more than 15 years of central banking experience. Dr. Torres has taught classes and seminars at the US and Mexican universities, as well as in national and international forums. He has published various articles in academic and non-academic publications about banking, international economics, trade, and applied econometrics. I've got to get that word down, Dr. Torres. Thank you so much for being here today, Dr. Torres. Welcome. And I am now turning the presentation over to you.
Well, thank you, Kimberly. And it's a pleasure to be with all of you. Thank you for having us. I think it's a great relationship we have with the Champion School of Real Estate. Before I start, I just want to mention to all your students that we're a great resource for all of you. Right now, as starting your real estate careers and further down the road, I think don't forget about us. I think we've been here. We're a staple of the Texas economy, of the real estate markets here in our state. And I think we do a pretty good job of informing the public of what's happening with our economy and what's happening with our real estate markets in our great state. So don't forget don't forget about us. You're currently students. One day you're going to finish. You're going to be professionals. You're going to be out there working. So don't forget us as a good resource of timely, useful information that can give you a good idea of what's happening in the real estate markets in the whole state of Texas. So let's talk about what happened and what do we expect to happen going forward, right? I think first of all, let's think about what the pandemic brought with it, right? It basically accelerated trends already prevalent before the pandemic. So all these things I'm going to talk about in a minute affected the economy and affected real estate markets, right? I think the first one to understand, and it's important to understand the first one because that gives you an idea of why the housing market has done so well during a recession and during a pandemic. The first thing I think that a trend that accelerated due to the pandemic was the income inequality issue we have in our country. Low educated, you think about who got hurt the most by the pandemic, who lost their jobs, and you compare that to the people who did well during the pandemic and bought houses. A lot of, housing market is doing great right now. So think about who hurt the most. You would find that people that work in industries that cannot socially distance, like leisure and hospitality, were hurt the most. And if you look at the characteristics of those families, of those households, you would find that they're more low educated, low skilled. And they were hit hardest by the crisis. So that's why initially, what sector of the residential market was hit the hardest was the apartment market. Why is that? Because most of the people that rent, or the households that rent, or the families that rent, work in leisure hospitality, right? Restaurants and bars. They work in industries that cannot socially distance and unfortunately lost their jobs. Now compare it to the housing market. Think about who was buying a house, who bought a house, who did well during the pandemic are families and households that work in industries that can socially distance. And those households are what? They're more, if you look at the demographics, their education, you would find that they are more educated. And that allowed them to, benefit the during, or even have a better outcomes during the pandemic than low skill, low educated. Now, another trend that we saw that was prevalent before the pandemic, but accelerated, was the idea of working from home. We were already talking about a 3-day weekend, right? We're already talking about having less working hours during the day, right? Zoom already existed before the pandemic. But what we found, right, that after COVID, that we can actually work from home and we can be productive. And that benefited the housing market, right? Why? Because now you don't have to commute to your work, right? You don't have to work from Monday to Friday. So that was a big push, a big plus to the housing market, but it was a negative to the office market. Why? Because people are now working from home, right? They're productive. And the issue now is that they have the taste of freedom of being able to work from home and not having to commute every day to an office, working Monday to Friday from 8 to 5. So that hurt the office market. And right now, there's a lot of uncertainty going forward of what's going to happen to the office market due to the new hybrid working model. We've heard about the terminology, the great resignation, right? A lot of people right now are quitting their jobs, are not coming back to the labor force because some of them don't want to go back to the office. So that's affecting that in a certain way. So that was the working from home, negative for the office sector, office market, but positive for the single family home sector, right? Another thing that we saw also It's the online purchase of goods and services. We saw that Amazon purchasing online, but accelerated due to the pandemic, and that was a initial negative to the retail sector, right? Because when you go and purchase goods and services, you have to interact socially. But at the end, what we're seeing is another hybrid system where we're probably going to have the brick and mortar working with the online business part of it. We've heard, Amazon has had the idea of actually opening up a store. One reason for that is especially clothing. If you look at the numbers, 20% of the things we buy online, especially clothing, we have to return that. So I think retail, you saw that, and it's that new model, that hybrid model of the brick and mortar and the online. And again, another factor I think that's going to affect jobs, where do we work from, the automation part of the economy, where we're seeing right now that getting workers, the cost of working and everything, and that goes back to who's more educated, right? Who's going to be more effective when that automation comes into play in our labor force. And I think before the pandemic hit the economy, here in the center, I co-wrote an article about the risks, the labor losses, the job losses that could happen to our Texas economy and to our Texas jobs due to automation. And a lot of jobs in our state are at risk of disappearing due to automation. So that has implications going forward also. Now, I mentioned this earlier. So why did the housing market do so well? Why are we in the midst of such a strong housing market? I think I mentioned this earlier, is that potential home buyers weren't affected by the pandemic. They're educated. They work that allowed them to work in industries that can socially distance. So basically, they weren't affected by the pandemic, right? They actually flourished, right? They did well during the pandemic. So well that they went out and they bought a new house. They needed more space, right? So because now they're working from home, and they went out into the housing market, and that's one reason we're seeing such a strong housing market. And I think another really important factor is that the pandemic increased the preferences of purchasing a home. Why? Because again, the working from home idea, where I don't have the hybrid working model, where I'm going to work from my house now, and I need more space. And I think that increase in preference is another reason why we're seeing such a strong housing market. And initially, I think one major factor was the low density, right? But the low density factor, when you want to be further away from people, given that you're living through a pandemic, played a role initially. Now, another major factor, I think is behind us, is the historical lower mortgage rates introduced by the Federal Reserve, by our central bank. The reason for that was to help the issues we had, the uncertainty with the economy. So that made the Federal Reserve act at that moment. And now what we're seeing now, given that also we have higher inflation levels, right? The Fed policy is changing, right? They started with a tapering. They're purchasing less. They're going to start purchasing 10-year bills and mortgage-backed securities. And depending on who you speak with this year, they've announced that they're going to raise the Fed funds rate between 2 or 4 times. Now, again, inflation plays a role in interest rates. If you remember your Finance 101 class, a nominal interest rate equals what? The real return that the bank wants from you, or the lender wants from you, plus inflation. So if inflation goes up, interest rates go up. And what we're seeing currently is that interest rates are increasing. So that's a major factor that we're going to see is going to change in 2022. And that should weaken demand and slow the housing market activity in 2022 and going forward. And I think another big factor that we saw why the housing market did well was fiscal stimulus. I think it didn't allow the economy to collapse. All the fiscal stimulus by the checks that we received in the mail, also the programs to help out businesses. All that was really important. All these factors played an important role to not allow the economy to collapse. And that all these factors, if you put it together, that's why we saw such a strong housing market. But going forward, I think really important to mention those low mortgage rates that we saw in 2021 and 2020 are behind us going forward. Now, just to show you the impact that the pandemic had on the economy, we shut down the economy during 2 months. Here is showing you the table of the jobs lost, and how many jobs have we recovered. Basically, in a span of 2 months, the Texas economy, our economy, lost 1.5 million jobs. That's an astonishing number. To lose 1.5 million jobs in the span of 2 months, that's unheard of. So the good news, if you look at each table, we have the US, Texas, Austin, we have the 4 major MSAs. At the bottom, I put the percentage of those jobs recovered and we lost during these 2 months. The great news, look at Texas. Texas has recovered all the jobs lost due to the pandemic. Texas is back. Texas jobs are in an expansion mode now. We recovered all the jobs. Now we're expanding jobs in the state of Texas. Austin, the same. It's above 26% pre-COVID levels. Austin has recovered all the jobs, the same as Dallas-Fort Worth. Now, Houston hasn't. It's around 74%. The same as San Antonio's a little bit higher. It's getting there, 95%. US is still 84%. And by the way, these numbers for the US are for December. Texas and the 4 major numbers are November. So think about it. They're ahead 1 month and they're still 84%. They only have the US economy has only recovered 84% of the jobs recovered. So why? Why is it difference? So I think that's important to know your markets, your industries. So why has Austin done so well compared to the other 3 major MSAs? Think about the industry mix. Who lives in Austin? What are the major industries in Austin? It's technology. Technology is a major industry in Austin. It's an industry that can socially distance. You can work from home, and it's doing really well. So that's why we see Austin jobs recovered. Dallas, now let's go to Dallas-Fort Worth. Why have the jobs at Dallas-Fort Worth recovered? Well, a lot of there's a big presence of the professional business service industry that's recovered all its jobs and it's done really well during the pandemic. It's an industry that can socially distance. The workers are medium to high educated workers, right? Also, the financial sector industry is doing really well, and it's recovered all the jobs here in the state of Texas. And that's a major also source of jobs in Dallas-Fort Worth, and also some technological jobs. Now, Houston, why is not doing well? Energy jobs are not doing well. Energy sector is not doing well, and that's why Houston is still lagging behind the other 3 major MSAs in the state. Now, San Antonio is doing better, but it hasn't recovered the jobs. Why? Think about tourism, leisure hospitality jobs. They play a major role in the San Antonio economy. That's why San Antonio hasn't recovered. And I think that's really important for everybody to understand their own community where they live at. As a future real estate professional, you have to understand who are your clients going to be? What does your economy depend on, right? Where do you live? So think about why all these MSAs are different and why ones are doing better than the other ones, right? The good news, Texas has recovered all of the jobs, and now we're back in, they're expanding now. Excuse me. Now, just to show you the industries, I mentioned this before, this makes up all the industries. Here we're comparing Texas to the US by sector, by industry. So right away, the industry has done better. That's expanding at a strong pace. Job growth is growing at a very strong pace. is the transportation and warehousing. It's recovered all the jobs. It's much above even at the U.S. level, right? Retail trade, wholesale trade, professional business services, I mentioned earlier, financial activities, utilities. All these jobs in Texas are back and now are growing. Now, think about the sectors not doing that well, that were hurt by the pandemic. Leisure hospitality, still 85% of the jobs, right? Here in our state of Texas. Again, another sector, mining and logging, it's still lagging behind. It's still far behind because what the hit had on the negative hit of the pandemic had on the oil industry when we shut down the economy, basically shut down demand for oil because we were not moving. We shut down the whole economy, right? The good news, we're recovering. The economy is doing well. Jobs are back. Unemployment rate, another important thing to look at is that how is the employment rate doing? You see it's coming down. We're still not back to pre-COVID levels, but it's consistently going down. Good news. Now, the only thing, going back to what I showed you earlier, professional business and financial activities are normally a big sector that demands office space. So think about, this is important going forward to office markets. These two sectors, the fire jobs, like they say, professional business service and financial activity jobs are back and are expanding. But in a minute, I'm going to show you the office numbers. The bad news is that vacancy rates in offices in the 4 major MSAs are still high and are increasing, relatively increasing, but are still high. So that tells you there's some type of disconnect between the traditional job growth in those sectors that demanded office space is not occurring anymore. That has implication for the office market, for the demand for office space. So again, the same for unemployment. Unemployment is a great measure of what's going to happen to housing markets and office and retail markets. Normally, when unemployment rates go down, they do much better, right? The good news, unemployment rate is going down. We're still not back to pre-COVID levels. Now, we've heard this. What's happening currently in our state and in the country, right? There's a lot of job openings. There's currently more job openings in our state than people that are unemployed. Just think about it. This is crazy. There's more job openings. The demand of labor is higher than basically maybe the supply, unemployed people. So that gives you that we're living through a really strong housing market. And and that translates into higher wages. So this graph is average hourly earnings for the US, Texas, and the 4 major MSAs. And you can see currently what we're observing is strong wage growth, strong earnings growth. Because right now, there's really strong demand for labor. The issue is the supply of jobs. People are not coming back fast enough into the labor force to satisfy that demand. Now, major sector for our economy, specifically for Houston economy, Midland, Odessa, is the oil and gas sector. As we know, it was hit really hard by the pandemic. When we shut down the economy, the demand for oil worldwide plummeted. Okay, so what happened? Oil and gas prices fell. The good news now that the US economy, the world economy is in recovery mode, the demand for oil is increasing, pushing up oil and natural gas prices. Good news for the oil industry. Now, if you look at the production of oil in our state, the number of rigs there, good indicators of what's happening in the oil industry. You can see right away they fell during the pandemic. It's increasing. Now, the only issue right now is that if you hear the CEOs of Apache, of Exxon, of all the major oil companies, what they're saying basically is that even though oil is in a very high high price right now, the barrel of oil is, they're not going to bring back all those people back into they're not going to rehire all the jobs. When they fire all these people, they're not going to rehire them back into the office. Why right now? Because what they're saying also is that they're not going to increase production. Why is that? Because in the past, what happened? When international oil prices went up, here in Texas, our state, right, would increase output, right? So when they increase output, it would increase the world supply of oil, and that would push down prices, world oil prices. So their major comment is that they're not going to do that. And that's why you see kind of a that red line right there, that plateau in oil production. Now, let's see what currently happens now. But definitely the oil sector is doing much better than it was a year ago. Good news for that important sector for our economy, specifically for Houston, no? Now, housing market, supply of new homes, what's happening? Incredible. Look at the numbers. These are Texas single housing permits. I could show you the same graph for Austin, Dallas-Fort Worth, Houston, San Antonio, El Paso, really strong new home construction. As you can see, it peaked. You see a little point right there at the end of this graph, go to the right. It peaked and now it went down. What happened? What's happening? So the issue is right now, specifically, is the input costs for new home construction. The home builders are facing steep price increases in their inputs. In a minute, I'll show you the graphs for lumber prices, for steel mill products, labor also. So all of these factors are affecting the supply of new homes. But the good news, still strong activity, but it's still lagging behind demand. And this was also prevalent even before the pandemic. Housing supply in our state was lagging behind. If you look at the numbers before COVID, months of inventory, new home construction was low. They were low. Why? Because one reason was new home construction was lagging behind. How about multifamily apartment housing permits also rising? They're increasing, kind of slowing down. Again, the input issues they're facing, that home builders are facing, are affecting their production of new homes. And also, it's really difficult to maintain that high level of activity. Now, I like to show this graph. This is the lots available by price cohort this is the sum for Austin, Dallas-Fort Worth, Houston, and San Antonio. So this basically is the pipeline of new home construction. If there are no lots at these price ranges, they're not going to be homes at those prices. What I'm saying, look at the blue line. If there are no lots to build homes with a price tag below $200,000, there's not going to be new home constructions of homes with a price tag below $200,000. So look what happened in our state. Look at that blue line. The majority of the lots in our state were homes initially 2004, 2005, all the way into 2012. The majority of the lots that we were building, the new home builders were using to build homes, were for homes with a price tag below $200,000. And what happened after 2014? Bam, boom. The lot production of homes with a higher price range, the red line, between $200,000 and below $300,000 increase. So now no home builders are being in that price range. That was a structural change there in the production of new homes. But what happened afterwards? All the highest price cohorts are increasing the lots available for new home production. And what happened? The last one, that orange line, between 400,000 and 300,000. That's the majority of lots that new homes are going to be built on. That shows you that the majority of the housing market that we're going to see going forward, positive in our state, is going to be for homes between $300,000 and $400,000. It first shifted from below $200,000 to $200,000 and below $300,000. Now it's moving towards 300,000 and below 400,000. That's our housing market going forward, the future of it. That the majority of the sales are possibly going to be between $300,000 and $400,000. That's going to be the value of the houses sold in our state going forward. But think about that. That's interesting how we've made that shift in Texas. Now, this is basically the inflation. This is the indicators for inflation. This is year-over-year price growth for the inputs used by builders, right? This is extraordinary. Think about builders that build homes, single-family homes. They've seen increases in prices above 20%. That's crazy. Multifamily builders, the same, almost 20% inflation. Think about it. Think about just you. Think about you just going to H-E-B one day and what you buy now costs 20% more. The basket of goods and services, well, it's a big hit to you, right? So think about for them, the cost. So why are we seeing also the cost of house increase is because the inputs are increasing. Now, home builders before this always talk about the 5 L's. What are the 5 L's? The first one is lumber price, lumber. Think about what we saw with lumber prices. I like this graph because it goes all the way to 1948. So it's the history of inflation of lumber prices in our country. Never in the history of every country have we registered 160% increase, 160% increase year over year in lumber prices. This is a major input for home builders. Yes, it went down, but now it's increasing again. But still, these are really high numbers, and this affects the building of new homes. So going back to the 5 L's, I talked about lumber prices. The other issue is land available for new home construction. There's been a short supply of that, and currently there's a really short inventory of land available for new home construction. Also lending for land development. Something happened after the great financial crisis. Well, what happened is, Dodd-Frank, there was a lot of changes in financial regulation that affected the lending for new land development. So that's a third L. The fourth L is labor. The labor price, the labor effect, the labor issue they're facing new home builders, the lack of supply of labor, of qualified workers to build new homes. And the last L is loss and regulation. The famous loss and regulation, they're facing relatively more regulation and issues with getting a permit or cost in that arena. Now, right now, what another major issue facing the new home construction is steel mill products. Look at the inflation. Look at the products that made with steel. Look at the inflation. This graph goes all the way back to 1940. Not even during the Second World War have we seen such strong prices in steel products, and this affects the building of new homes. 140%. That's also an input used by home builders. Now, all of this is happening. Why? Because of the supply chain issues we're having in our country and worldwide. And that's pushing up prices, and that's pushing up inflation. No? I mentioned wages. Look at the increase in wages. 15% over year over year, what residential home builders are facing in wage increases. Now, sales. Let's go on sales now. The housing market. Kimberly mentioned, yes, great year for Texas. Activity strong, sales are great, but they would be better. Why? How could they be better if we had more inventory of homes available for sale? They're at a historical low levels. They've improved somewhat, but that's restraining sales. If you look at the Texas housing sales, they went down and they improved. But the reason why that happened is not because of lack of demand is because of lack of supply. I think the major headwind we're facing currently is the lack of supply of homes available for sale, and that's pushing down sales. Now, Dallas-Fort Worth, really strong housing market. Of the four major MSAs, was the only one that registered year-over-year. If you compare 2020 to 2021 home sales in Dallas-Fort Worth, they were actually negative. Can you believe that? Negative. But why? Because the lack of months of inventory of homes available for sale, the lack of supply of homes for sale. That caused the Dallas-Fort Worth market to register negative home sales in 2021. It wasn't because of lack of demand. Excuse me, it's a sensitive mouse. Now, I want to show you the comparing housing active and new listings. Normally, active listings are much higher than low listings. Look what happens after when we hit the frenzy, the housing frenzy in 2021. Look at the gap, or 2020, excuse me, between active listings and new listings. It disappeared. Basically, the new listings are the active listings. Wherever it comes in, it's sold practically, less than 20 days, less than 30 days, depending on the market, right? 20 days, depending on the market. So right now, a strong housing market. The issue, again, is a lack of homes available for sale. I'd like to show this. I can show you this for Dallas-Fort Worth, for Austin, for Houston, for San Antonio, El Paso. The composition of home sales of the market share has changed. When I got here in the center, I got here in 2012. The majority of the homes sold in our state had a price below $200,000. That's that blue line, right? That was the market share. Look what's happened now. Look at the market share now. How does it change? Now, the majority of the homes sold in our state are between $200,000 and below $300,000. But look what's happening with that yellow line. I talked about the lot development. That orange line. With that price cohort between $300,000 and below $400,000, it's gaining market share. All the rest, the $400,000 below $500,000 and the $500,000 and above is gaining market share. Now, if you look at Austin, just to give you an idea, 1/3 of the home sales are with a price above $500,000. Think about it; it's mind-blowing. This is Texas. This is not California, but that's the new housing market we're living in, and it's going to continue going forward. So again, I mentioned this earlier. I think the majority of the sales going forward interstate are basically, I think, are going to be between $300,000 and below $400,000. That orange line. Months of inventory. I mentioned this. This shows the months of inventory for our state, the U.S. And look at the historical low months of inventory. A normal market is considered to be a stable market. Is considered to be around 6 months of inventory. If you look at Texas, our state, and the other major MSAs, you would right away you can see it's even below 2 months. In one case, it's below 1 month or around 1 month of inventory. That's unheard of. That shows you the issue we're having right now is a supply issue. Let's do by price cohort, by price ranges. Look at the price range. Look at the, basically all of them. Even the $500,000 above. There are no homes. 2 months of basically of months of inventory. So all of them, you see them. You go further down with the price ranges, even more constrained months of inventory. If you go even further down. Now, think about your principles of economic, right? What happens when strong demand faces weak supply? What happens to prices? They adjust what? Upward. And these are crazy prices. Excuse me the word, but yes, these are crazy prices. We haven't seen this type of increase in housing prices in the state in the past. Think about just Austin. This is a repeat sales index. This is a great indicator. This is better than the median house price. Why is that? Because it's not affected by the composition of home sales. If you sell more homes at a higher price range, the median price or the average price is definitely going to increase. This does not affect the repeat home sales price. What is that? We track the same home through time that's sold through the multiple listing service, right? So it eliminates that composition effect. So think about just Austin. We've seen increases by around 40%. Right now, around 35% year over year. These are sustainable home price increases. Look at Dallas. Look at Fort Worth, Dallas, Dallas Plano Irving, above 20%. The same for Fort Worth. So Dallas, let's do DFW, above 20% year over year price growth. San Antonio, above 18%. Houston is the one that's a little bit less. What is that? 10%, no, 15%, but still really, really strong home price growth. And these are the median home prices, of course. It's incredible. Right now, the median home price in Austin is around $480,000. Think about that, right? You see the difference one that's followed by Dallas, then Fort Worth, then Houston, and of course, San Antonio. Just to show you the comparison of how the home price growth compared the median home price, how it's increased. So Austin right away, you can see that really, really strong price growth in median home prices in Austin. And I think that's due a lot to the composition because a lot of the home sales are above $500,000, okay? Now, what we're seeing in the housing market is also translating into the rest of the residential market, and that includes single-family rents. Yes, not such a high rate of growth, but look at the graph, look at the numbers before that. These are single-family rents, year-over-year growth rates. Look at Austin, look at Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, look at the growth rates. Yes, not as strong, but strong for the single-family rent market, right? Extraordinary. So it's here, and it's also in apartments. In a minute, we're going to talk about the apartment market, and we'll see really, really, really strong rent growth in apartments also. Now, I talked about this earlier. I think this is a headwind, or not a headwind, but I think it's going to lead us to a more stable, steady market, normal market that we saw that we observed pre-COVID. Interest rates. I love to show this graph, simple graph, going back to the 70s. It shows the relationship between interest rates and inflation. The blue line is a 30-year mortgage rate. The red line is a 10-year treasury bill. The black line is inflation. So what happened in the past? Look at the black line. When the black line increases, what happened to the red line and blue line? They also increased. What happened when that black line started to decrease? Boom, the mortgage rates, the bond rates also started to decrease. Again, I mentioned this earlier. A nominal interest rate, any nominal interest rates, like a mortgage rate, equals what? The real rate, the rate that the bank wants from you or the lender wants from you, and plus what? Inflation or future inflation. Same thing. Well, kind of the same thing, but yes. So if inflation goes up, what happens to interest rate? And we're currently seeing it. If you look at the news, right now, mortgage rates are back to March 2020 levels. So they're back up more than 3.25 and above. They're increasing. So look at that black line. Inflation right now in our country is around 7% year over year. So of course, that blue line, that red line has to move upward, right? Now, initially, the Federal Reserve mentioned that inflation was temporary. And what we know right now, that was incorrect. Inflation is not temporary. It's permanent, right? When they talked about inflation being temporary, I think that was an error on their part. It's permanent. It's affecting us. It should slow down, right? Because the supply issues, some of them should start to go away. But still, inflation is going to be an issue, and that's going to push up interest rate. It's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be 7%. It should go back, but still, interest rates should be higher. So apartment markets, I mentioned this earlier. So this is the Austin overall apartment market. What we hear is blue line is the vacancy rate. The red line is the effective rent growth rate. What we did here in the center, we did something different that a lot of people don't do. We estimated a national vacancy rate for each sector, for apartment, class A, overall apartment. We did the same thing for the office market, overall office market, class A, the retail in the sector, the warehouse in sector. And we did it also for the 4 major MSAs. So we estimated a national vacancy rate for each market and for each region. What is that? Remember when we talked about earlier about the 6 months of inventory? That's a normal market, right, of inventory. So we did the same thing for the national vacancy rate. So that's the gray line. And what does that tell you? It tells you if the vacancy rates are above that gray line, the rents should go down, right? Because you're above the national vacancy rate. You're above the normal level. Again, if you're below that gray line, rents, that red line should start to increase. So look what's happening right now. The vacancy rates are falling. The residential market the apartment market right now is doing well. It's one of the great stories also, a big turnaround after the pandemic, right? Now that the economy is doing much better, people are getting their jobs. There was a lot of uncertainty surrounding the apartment market. And the great news, it made a major U-turn, and now it's in a very good position currently. Look at the red line for effective rent growth, also really, really strong growth. I've always showed you Dallas-Fort Worth, Houston, San Antonio, the same trends, basically, a very, very strong rent growth, and rent and vacancy rates are below the effective, the national rate. Absorption. What's net absorption? Net absorption is the demand for apartments, for office, for retail, for warehouse. Look at the blue line. Great news. Demand is up, high, strong. And I think construction is also, that's leading into more apartment construction. Now, think about it this way, that apartment market is benefiting by having such a strong home price growth. Unfortunately, a lot of people are being priced out, but still families have to live somewhere. And that, if you can't buy a home, well, you look, maybe you're going to rent a home, or you're going to live in an apartment. So that's one major reason the residential market is also doing well. Now, office, I mentioned this earlier. So office is not doing well. Look at the lines with the vacancy rate. This is Houston. Houston is a more extreme situation. Why? Because a lot of the office market in Houston depends on the oil and energy industry. And I mentioned earlier, they're not rehiring. They're not in a job growth mode right now of rehiring people. So what's happening right now is that look at the asking rent growth actually declining, kind of negative, and vacancy rates are still relatively really high, right? Houston would be the extreme, but if I showed you Dallas-Fort Worth, Austin, and San Antonio, same. Vacancy rates are high, rent growth is 0 or even possibly even negative. And again, I mentioned this earlier. Why? Important to know what's happening in your sector, in your industry, in your region. Maybe one day you're working as a broker in Houston offices. Well, you have to know where is your market coming from? Where's your demand coming from? So this graph is a cool graph that shows you the demand for the tenants. Who's renting those offices? Who's demanding those offices in Houston? Right away, the majority is what? The square feet rented or tenant used in Houston. The majority is what? Oil and gas extraction. That second, fire jobs that I mentioned to you earlier are really important. And then you have engineering, accounting, research management. All those jobs, the third ones are also related to the oil industry. So that's why that's why the Houston office market is doing even not so good, even it's the extreme case compared to the other 3 major MSAs, not doing so well, right? And the perspectives going forward are still negative going forward, not really positive, right? Office. This is office in Class A in Dallas-Fort Worth. So again, demand is positive, is the net absorption. If you look at demand for office space in Class A in Dallas-Fort Worth, look at the blue lines, they're still negative. It's improving, but still negative. But going to my original point, look at employment growth. Employment growth is the FIRE jobs, the financial activities and professional business jobs. Look at the strong red line employment growth. So here we have some type of disconnection where job growth in professional business services, financial activities is really, really strong. It's back to pre-COVID levels. It's growing, it's expanding, but it's not translating into what? Into more office demand. So we have to be careful with the office market. There's still some uncertainty going forward. What's going to happen to that sector? Again, under construction, we see again the vacancy. We have a national vacancy rate, and look what's happening in construction is still declining for under construction for new office space, Class A in Austin, even in Austin with such a strong economy. How about retail? Retail is doing well. You know, retail. I know it's just be careful. Just be careful when we hear all those extreme ideas. You know, retail's going to disappear. Office is going to disappear. It's not going to disappear, right? There's always an in between. It's not a zero-sum game where everybody loses or wins, right? There's always something in between. The same thing for retail. I mentioned earlier, there's a hybrid model now. It's been shown that you need, yes, the online sales, but you need a brick and mortar store also. So what's happening in Houston? Houston is doing well. Look at the vacancy rates. They're below. Asking rent is still strong, positive. It's slowing down, but still Houston retail looks good, and it looks good for 2022. Net absorption. Yes, initially we had the negative because of the COVID hit. Right? Everybody's buying online, nobody's going to stores. But what's happening now, right? We saw demand increasing for retail space. This is Dallas. Good news in employment growth, strong employment growth also in the retail sector. We mentioned earlier, it's back to pre-COVID levels, actually expanding. San Antonio vacancy, the same. San Antonio's a bit different. We're seeing vacancy still strong also. The low vacancy, but we've seen it's kind of slow down in construction activity because it was strong, but still, let's see going forward, no? Different market, San Antonio and Houston. Warehouse, the sector that's done the best has been what? The warehouse market, definitely. Why? Because it was real positive of the online purchasing. They need distribution centers. Also, the supply chain issue we're facing, the months of inventory, they need more distribution centers. So the supply issue also favored the Dallas warehouse market, and is doing really well, and is doing well in the 4 major MSAs. And the expectation is for it to do really well going forward. Again, employment growth, demand strong. Demand is continues to strong. That was Houston, was Dallas. This is Houston, and also San Antonio. Metro is strong. Construction was a really high level, not kind of slowing down, but still strong activity in warehouse, and that's what's expected going forward. I'm not a health specialist, right? Health economist, but what changed is now the overview of what's happening with something we have to continue to monitor are the number of COVID-19 cases. The blue line is the new cases of COVID-19. Of course, the Omicron variant increased that. There's also good news, vaccinations continue to increase in our state. Migration, there's been a lot of discussion about the migration issue, right? So a lot of Californians coming into our state buying houses. Well, yes, the majority of the movers, this goes all like to 2020, is our people from California moving into our state. How about the migration by counties? It's the majority of the Californians that are moving to our state are from Southern California. And where they're moving to? They're moving to the 4 major MSAs, Travis, Harris County, Tarrant, Williamson, Bexar, all the 4, Austin, Dallas-Fort Worth, Houston, and San Antonio. Sorry, I missed the slide. I should showed you this. This is where the Californians are coming from. The majority of Californians are coming from LA. Arizona's there, but San Diego's there, Orange County, Riverside, San Bernardino. So it's more Southern Californians that are moving to our state. There's also discussion about investors' transactions. Investors are coming in and buying all the houses, right? Well, if you look at the numbers for all the major MSAs for our state, they're basically the same. Investors' transactions remain around the past decade average around the state. It is strong, but still in those same levels. Holding period, this is interesting. This has implications going forward for a housing market. The holding period have increased. People are living more in their homes over time than it did in the past. These are for the different prices, different years. If you look at the graph, it's more inclined, and then starts to get flatter and flatter and flatter. 2021 is the flattest. That means that people are staying more time in their house before they go out and sell it. Evictions, this is increasing. The evictions are going back. The eviction moratorium did their job, but now evictions are starting to increase. The good news, we're not expecting it to be like it with initially when people found themselves unemployed, right? A lot of renters that worked in industries that cannot socially distance. It's changed. It's a major U-turn. Unfortunately, some people were re-evicted, but it's not a major issue facing the apartment market. And it's positive for the housing market, the millennials. And I think besides that, look at the Gen Z, younger millennials coming into the market. That's going to be a big push to our housing market here in the state of Texas. Good news for the future. Just to finish, the path to the recovery depends on COVID-19 outcomes, right? The kind of recovery could be hindered by other upsurges of COVID-19. Further waves of infection can reverse mobility, spending, affecting that path to recovery. Definitely 2022, the economy will continue to grow. We saw that. Texas jobs are in expansion mode, right? But definitely it's going to increase at a slower rate. We're going to go back to that normal structural trend that we saw pre-COVID-19. Employment should continue to expand. Good news right now for oil and gas. It's expected to continue growth rate to recover in 2022 because as long as the global economy, U.S. economy are rebounding from the pandemic. How the housing market, how's it going to do? It's going to do well, strong housing market. I think the issue is the major headwind is going to be the lack of homes available for sale. And also, I think the increase in interest rates. Mortgage rates, I think, are going to help to slow down the housing market to more normal trends. I think hopefully we're going to have a soft landing to more pre-COVID levels before. Now, again, the issue, homes, the homes available, low inventories for homes available for sale, especially for homes with a price range below $300,000. I mentioned this earlier, mortgage rates definitely are going to increase, right? The Fed funds rate is expected to increase in 2022. As we know, inflation has changed from temporary ones to more permanent ones. Mortgage refinancing was slow as mortgage rates rise and pool of households are able to refinance diminishes, right? So I get this question a lot. Let me finish with this one. Is there a household housing bubble forming, or are we in a housing bubble? I would say no. Why? Let's compare it to the 2006-2007 housing bubble. First thing, loose lending standards. Think about what happened during the 2006-2007 housing bubble. What was a joke back then? That anybody with a pulse could get a mortgage loan, right? Are we saying the same things currently in the housing market? No. Financial regulation change. Right now, if you look at the numbers of the people that are getting mortgage loans, are people that can qualify. FICO scores are really high right now for those people that get mortgage loans, right? So it's not, I don't see those loose lending standards. That free credit, people are that access to credit to households that shouldn't get that access to credit. They shouldn't be buying homes. That's not currently happening. Lax oversight, right? Our institutions failed us during the 2006-2007 housing bubble. They were not regulating correctly those malpractices of people getting mortgages where they shouldn't have getting mortgages. That's not currently happening, right? Also, I think of the third one, the investment. What did we see in 2006-2007? The major motive was what? To flip a house. People had 2 or 3 houses. They were flipping. Right now, the majority of the people that are buying homes are people that want to live in that house, and they're going to stay there for a while, right? So I don't see those things, and I would say no. Now, still, we have to monitor what's happening in the housing market. I wanted to show you, these are Texas housing prices. So these are a repeat sales index of housing prices in the state. I just wanted to show you how rare it is for nominal prices. Let's say you buy a house for $300,000, and then you go to the market 2 years later, 3 years later, 5 years later, and you want to sell it, and you're surprised, you sell it for $250,000, right? And you sell it for a loss. This is what this is showing you. That's a rare occurrence for nominal housing prices to fall. In the past, interstate, basically 2 occasions. 80s. What happened in the 80s? The oil shock. The economy, in our Texas economy, was in a deep downturn. And that caused the housing prices to fall. Again, what was the other occasion? After the 2006, 2007 housing bubble, the financial crisis. Humongous shock. A lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of people had houses and should have had houses. And what happened? Look what happened to the housing prices that declined. But normally it don't. Again, I think we're going to go back. Those levels that we're currently seeing of increasing housing prices should slow down, going back to more pre-COVID levels. Now, the housing office market, I mentioned this earlier, that's what the uncertainty is. It's been exposed to some pervasive underlying changes in the work environment, the hybrid work environment we're living through, and we're going to live going forward, right? And so we don't know, right, when employees are going to go back to the office, and also the appearance of the Delta and Omicron has delayed that even further. So still a great uncertainty going into the office market going forward. Yeah, we mentioned it earlier. I showed the numbers. Vacancy rates remain at a very high level, while employment growth is actually expanding in business and fire jobs. So a lot of uncertainty. The hybrid work model is here to stay. Let's see what's going to happen going forward to the office market. I mentioned this earlier, the ratio between business employment and growth has changed. Office space is still going to be needed. I'm not saying it's going to go away, right? Technology, life sciences, professional businesses, and financial activities. Now, e-commerce, I think e-commerce also a hybrid model. You're going to have the brick and mortar, but we're also going to have the online services. That's good for that sector. Warehouse, definitely the best sector, positive. It's going to continue to be aided by the e-commerce, the inventory requirements, and the supply chain diversification in the coming years. Just to finish, the only issue they can have is overbuilding of industrial people get, into frenzy. Let's build more warehousing. It's so good, right? And what happens? You overbuild. And then the office market doesn't do well. We did that. We saw that in 2019 in Houston. They started overbuilding in Houston. What happened? Rents went down. Demand went down. So it's something to looking forward. Going forward, we have our forecasts. They're free. You can look it up for all the major sales for the housing market. We have forecasts for apartments, office, Class A, overall, warehouse, retail. So all this is available. And I also just want to tell you, please visit our webpage. We have all these great publications. They're free. You can subscribe to them, and they give you a great idea, a great picture of what's currently happening and what's going to happen going forward in our different real estate markets in our state of Texas. So thank you very much. I know it was a lot. It's really important. A lot of things are happening, but I wanted to give you a whole picture, right, of what's happening and what to expect in our real estate markets in our great state of Texas. Thank you very much.
Dr. Torres, thank you so much. This was incredible, inspiring information. We thank you for being here today. And I just wanted to I always like to close with the positive. And some of the notes that I put for our viewers is that we are looking at a normal, steady market pre-COVID, no housing bubble, We have a strong housing market here in the great state of Texas. And one thing that I really love that you mentioned, and this is our model at Champion School of Real Estate, is the hybrid model. When live and online came around, we didn't go the direction of closing shop, because we know that we want to continue to grow our brick and mortar, because brick and mortar fuels our online fuels our brick and mortar, and we want to have those opportunities for our students to come and have a place to go. So I'm glad that you touched on the hybrid model, and that office and retail will not be disappearing. But we have a strong housing market. I am so appreciative of your time today. Always. It was a great presentation. I read that education is the aphrodisiac of the world right now, especially during this pandemic. Congratulations to our students for being here today and staying educated. And obviously, you're investing in your future. And with the idea of education, I wanted to just show this to you guys real quick. Just some reminders of some upcoming great events that we have coming up. And again, we will have Dr. Torres's presentation emailed out and made available on our YouTube channel tomorrow. Great information to share with your clients, with your offices. So motivating, so exciting to see what 2022 has in store for the real estate economy. So I'm going to share my screen real quick. All right, so to our champion students and community, the top left-hand box, this is a screenshot of all the, just a summary, just a real quick snippet of seasons 2 and 3 of all of our YouTube videos. Rita Santamaria, owner and founder, has interviewed many top producers around the state of Texas. And right here, if you want a little shot in the arm for 2022 and some great marketing ideas, check out our Champions YouTube channel. We have a total of 4 seasons and tons of videos on marketing and jumpstarting your career for both new and seasoned agents. If you are a proud champion and you would like to have some Champions merchandise from your alma mater, please feel free. We have beautiful sweatshirts, pullovers available at our merchandise store we just launched. And as well, please take a look, download our catalog of courses we offer. We do not only real estate, but loan, inspection, and appraisal classes. And you can download our beautiful 45-page catalog from our homepage. And then please make plans to attend. If you're looking for a new home and real estate, you're going through the classes and you have not decided on your brokerage, Champions is pleased to offer our upcoming virtual career fair. If you are attending classes in these regions, it's free to attend. We'll have sponsoring brokers from all over the state spending about 10 minutes with you to let you know about the brokerage, with the hopes that you have an opportunity to meet with them. So just a little sampling of just the little extras that we provide here at Champions. We thank you for your business. And Dr. Torres, thank you again for being here today. Hopefully I'll get to meet you in person one day. Give our best to Dr. Gaines, and wishing all of our champions an incredible and successful 2022. Good luck. Best wishes. And Dr. Torres, I'm going to drop one of those champion sweatshirts in the mail to you.
Well,
okay.
Oh, great. Thank you, Kimberly. I appreciate it. Nice.
Thank you for being here today. And we're going to go ahead and sign off. Enjoy the rest of your day.